Imagine a world where every threat, ransomware, supply chain attacks, zero-day exploits, is stopped before it can even begin. ThreatLocker makes that world a reality with a zero-trust approach to cybersecurity. By giving you granular control and every executable in your environment, ThreatLocker protects your business around the clock. No more guessing, no more gaps. Just rock-solid protection that keeps your operations running smoothly and your data secure. Discover how ThreatLocker's least privilege approach can safeguard your organization against known and unknown threats. Take the first step towards total peace of mind by visiting securityweekly.com/ThreatLocker today. Now for the Enterprise Security Weekly News. You can check out securityweekly.com/ESW397 if you want to follow along as we go through the news, or for links to the articles we're covering, or for my commentary on it. And there's quite a bit of commentary on some of these today, particularly the Cybereason one, which is interesting. Also joining us is Mr. Jason Wood. How you doing, Jason?
Good. Happy to be here as usual. Looking forward to springtime. It's starting to appear, so I'm thrilled.
Oh my God. Yeah, I am. It's always a tough time for me because I've got bad seasonal allergies. And this morning I was dying. My partner opened the window during the night to cool things down. And I just woke up I'm usually, after a week of taking loratadine, I'm usually fine, but I haven't hit that week yet. I'm only like 3 days in, and I've not been able to dull my stupid body and its stupid responses to stupid pollen. That's how I feel.
Hope we get something quick.
I live on allergy medicine because I'm allergic to dust and live in the desert, so... I feel
we've all made good choices. East Tennessee has every kind of tree. Every kind of tree is here. If it exists on the planet, well, maybe not that many trees, but 140 different species of tree here. So something is always blowing pollen into the air.
That's rough.
All right, let's on to happier things. Let's talk about, since I mentioned it already, let's talk about Cybereason CEO angrily storming out of a board meeting and quitting.
Where do we start with that though? So their history has just been problematic, right? It's been, for the last couple of years, they've had troubles. There have been so many layoffs. I don't even know if I know how many. And I know, actually, I was at a party about a month ago with somebody who worked there, and I heard some stuff.
At Cybereason? Yeah, because Cybereason was Boston-based, right?
Yeah, and I thought, wow, there's something really bad coming. But it's been tumultuous for the last few years over there. And they were, one of the biggest, most promising vendors at a time. I remember going to an event way back when, and, Sam was there and talking, and it was a great event. Mm-hmm. But last few years have just been really hard for them.
I'm sure the story, well, I'm not sure, but maybe the story will eventually come out. They hid it pretty well. Like it was a surprise to me, when it came out that for the audience, if you're not looking at the notes here, let me just kind of run through the story a bit here. Cybereason was one of the original EDR vendors that emerged right around the same time Next Gen AV was emerging, which replaced all the big players like Symantec and McAfee and resulted in them kind of being dismantled and sold for parts by private equity. They grew very quickly, raised I think it was in 2021 or 2022, raised a big round for a total of $800 million. And that last round valued them at $2.7 billion. So they became a unicorn right before the interest prices went bonkers and the market kind of fell out. And we talked a lot about that. Longtime listeners will remember the graph I put together that showed the the number of cybersecurity unicorns that we were talking about every month. We had graphics, on-screen graphics for unicorns because it came up in every show. Almost every week we were talking about a new unicorn. We came up with new terms for bigger unicorns. We were talking about decacorns.
Decacorns and octocorns.
10 billion or higher.
Yeah.
And
then zombie corns.
Yeah, and then zombie corns, right? Like they'll never raise another round, so now they're zombie corns. And the layoffs, I think it was June 2022, the new unicorn stopped and the layoffs started. And it was almost like a hard cutting point. There was a little bit of overlap, but Cybereason was one of the first to start doing some layoffs. I think it was 100 people, and they did a few more rounds of layoffs, laid off a few more 100 people after that. And by April 2023, I forgot, in the beginning of 2022, 6 months before the first round of layoffs, they filed for IPO, confidential S1 filing. And so like that's how high the high was before 6 months later, they were laying off 100 people. And by April 2023, the news came out that Cybereason cut their valuation by 90%, went from $2.7 billion to around $250 million valuation. And then in November 2024, bringing it up to the present, we read some press releases that Cybereason was set to merge with TrustWave, which Singtel had sold off. Singtel acquired TrustWave back in the mid-2010s. And that catches us up to the present, where that merger, that deal has been terminated, apparently. And during the talks to kind of try and work out how much money Cybereason is going to get to stay alive, the CEO had a disagreement. Apparently, there's lawsuits involved here as well between the Cybereason executives and SoftBank and the other investors here. So it's a proper drama. It's a proper mess.
And what's interesting is that Eric Gann, before he was an executive, the CEO of Cybereason, was an executive at SoftBank. So he came from SoftBank, which is really interesting.
Right. Yeah.
You would think that might have given him a better perspective of how things were going to go, because I don't think SoftBank is known for putting aside their own interests for whatever's best for their portfolio companies. At least that's not my perception.
Yeah.
I just don't see any great outcome for Cybereason at this point. It's just been piece of trouble after piece of trouble after piece of trouble. And the market is commoditized at this point that I mean, maybe somebody way smarter than me could figure it out, but I don't know that there's any coming back from so much drama and so many missteps, frankly.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know I'd want to buy a product from a company that's got this level of turmoil publicly going on. And Jackie just shared the leadership page, and it's such a strange, like if you can choose any 4 leaders from your company, who are you going to choose? And if you chose general counsel as one of those 4, you might be Cybereason. But
they also made the CFO the new CEO. So,
and that was the part that I thought was
chop shop
most telling.
That's actually super common, though. I see that a lot. Like that's usually the go-to when the CEO dies suddenly or quits suddenly, or honestly, I've seen that doesn't seem that strange to me, but the other strange bit here is like the other leaders here, VP Global R&D, interesting, usually wouldn't see that in the top 4 shared on the leadership page. And then, less strange because I think most of us know that the biggest chunk of their market, or at least a huge percentage of their customers are in Japan. So the president, JPAC, is also featured on this page. And that's another part of the story that I don't quite understand, like how a company headquartered in Boston by founders from Israel, moved to Boston, when they after they started in Israel, ended up having the bulk of their customer base in Japan. I'm not quite sure how that happens.
Isn't that where SoftBank
So
is?
it is. Yeah. So maybe you just solved it. Maybe it's just the investor.
Yeah, well, I
Just
mean, because
investor
usually,
connections.
if investors don't just provide money, right? They also provide intros and connections and new business to help them get a return on their investment. So that would be my guess, is that, you either have a previous executive from a Japanese company, or you have a Japanese
Right.
investor that comes in and is like, hey, let me introduce you to some people who can use your services.
Well,
That
sure,
was
but
obvious enough that I feel dumb now.
I
sure, but
wasn't
the
trying to
one
make
I
you feel
No,
agree
it's
with
okay.
that in a startup phase, but your total addressable market in the US, which is presumably why those executives moved to the US, is
Mhm.
here.
Yeah.
And theoretically, just
Yeah.
sheer size, nothing else, not there's no slating here, but your total addressable market in the US, and if your executives and your headquarters are here in the US and your biggest market share is on the other side of the world.
Unless the market here is saturated and you have a better chance over there, maybe. Right?
Yeah.
Like, I guess they're just competing with Trend Micro over there, maybe. I don't know any other
Possibly, but again, they
EDR
were one
vendors
of
that
the
are
first,
big
and
in
they came
Japan.
out of the
Yeah.
gate so strong. And if they failed to capture that market, something strategy-wise wasn't working.
Yeah, look
Yeah.
at Cylance. At one point, it was CrowdStrike and Cylance. Like those were the two ones that were going to be big, and then everybody kind of took the acquisition by BlackBerry news, like with a tilted head, like what?
Yeah. Yep.
And now they're spinning Cylance back out again, for an order of magnitude less than what they acquired them for. So it was a market that got commoditized very quickly, right? Like the valuations of these companies were very much time limited until everybody else caught up. OS Query allowed anybody kind of build their own EDR pretty quickly. And a few companies did that. And the opportunity for that to be worth a lot of money is gone now.
They also appear to me to be one of the companies that kind of chases trends. They're saying they're AI detection and response now. So generally, when you see a company doing that and following, all companies have to a certain extent. But when you're constantly doing that, it's
Sign
I
of
hate to,
desperation,
and
maybe.
nobody hate me, but yeah, it's a sign of no vision, right? You don't have a clear vision for the product.
Right.
You don't have a clear vision for the customer you're talking to. And so you're just kind of grabbing at straws at whatever the hot new thing is, because that's what the buzz is, rather than understanding your differentiation with your market and what really matters to them. And I
And
think
all you end up
anybody
doing,
with as
sorry.
skeptical as people in security are, if you are a security company worth anything, the way you use, market, talk about AI to your actual audience is very nuanced. And so when you see a company just like AI threat detection, I'm just like, okay. Anyway,
And in that
just
effort to try and differentiate or chase the latest trend, you look like everybody else, so you just disappear.
Yeah.
Right.
So I'm like,
At that
oh yeah,
point, even more.
Cybereason. I think I have one of their t-shirts.
So, yeah.
They had great merch. They had a great podcast.
Mhm.
I mean, they did a good job on so many fronts. Sales and marketing were pretty good. But then again, FireEye had great sales and marketing, right? And we saw how that ended up for them. They, again, too late to the market with their EDR product, couldn't save them. And I heard rumors they scrapped 2 versions of their endpoint security product before they finally got out the HX product that was their endpoint product. And by then, like there was no more market to grab.
Yeah.
It was just too late. That's FireEye, to be clear. Yeah. And now the remnants of that are somewhere in what is McAfee called now?
Trellix?
No,
Trellix. Thank you.
that's
Yeah.
right.
The
And then
remnants of
Norton
that
is
are
Jen. Is that right?
So Norton, the Norton side of
Yeah.
is Jen. Is it just Jen?
I think it's
I thought
just
it was something.
GEN because that's who
Yeah.
Howie Shu is. He's over there. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's Benny in the previous conversation was talking about like a tree for all the Linux distributions and their lineage. That would be interesting to do with cybersecurity too. Now that
dear
all these
heavens.
companies have been broken up and split off and acquired and mixed around,
Spit back out again, and then been acquired, and they get spit back out again, and
It would be the
If you
weirdest
find me
looking
a
tree I ever
generative
did see.
AI that can logic through all of that, I will. I will believe AGI is a thing.
yeah, right. I would not trust it to do that. So some interesting funding here. I mean, there's some AI funding here, but the only one that I think is really interesting to talk about, given I don't want to go over this week, is Spectre Ops. So I saw some folks, in back channels saying Spectre Ops, like remind me what they do again. Like why they look like a consulting company. Why is a consulting company getting a huge Series B, a $75 million Series B? And I think the answer to that is, and we've seen a couple cases of it before, like Bishop Fox is a good example. ForgePoint put a $30 million Series A into them for them to build in a attack surface management platform. So we are seeing a lot of these consulting companies kind of building out products, and they are they're the company behind Bloodhound, and they have an enterprise version of Bloodhound. So I think that's what the vast majority of this money is for.
And I had the same reaction when I saw this link was, wait, they're a consulting company. That's where they started out, was pen testing, really advanced red team type of assessments, really looking like the adversaries. So I was quite curious when I saw this and looked into it, and I'm like, oh, okay, we've gone, like you said, Bloodhound Enterprise.
They started focusing on Active Directory, which is the bane of everybody's existence. So probably a pretty brilliant business move.
Yeah. Bloodhound is basically an AD tool, and it seems like it's a really narrow space to go after with a breach and attack simulation sort of tool, also a mapping tool. But because Active Directory is everywhere and nobody's ever getting rid of it, and it's like the first thing that attackers go after, or pen testers, it makes sense to really focus on that.
Yeah, I mean, Bloodhound's thing was like, what's the shortest path to domain admins, right? That was what you heard. That was the benefit to the pen testers who were using it. And yes, very focused on Active Directory. But like you said, it's pretty niche here, right? This is pretty narrowly defined thing they're going after.
So it is niche, but it is the biggest niche. Microsoft is still the world's largest.
They claim 90%
enterprise IT company and security company.
Yeah. So in their write-up, they claim 90% of enterprises are using AD for IAM.
I believe
that. A lot of acronyms.
I wouldn't be shocked.
Yeah, that would not shock me either.
If it's not an accurate number, that 90% isn't accurate, I expect it to be in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
So it's not by being off by far. Sorry, go ahead, Adrian.
Speaking of niche, Skybox Security shuts down. Anybody here familiar with Skybox? Because I feel like everybody's going to be in two groups. Like, who is that? And the other group is, they were still around?
That was my original when I saw this this afternoon. Wait, they still exist?
So yeah, Firemon, AlgoSec, Tufin, and Skybox Security were the four firewall orchestration vendors. So if you had different brands of firewalls, which a lot of companies used one kind of firewall internally, maybe like Cisco PIX or something like that, and then at the perimeter they'd have Checkpoint, or they'd have some other brand of firewalls, ASA in one place, Palo Alto in the other. Very common thing. And things with rules got very complicated very quick. So there was a market for this, and still is. This is niche. There still is a market for it, just not for vendors, right? And most of the other vendors have moved into cloud security and other areas, and maybe Skybox just didn't make that transition as well as the others here. So Tufin is picking up the pieces of Skybox Security. They're buying the remaining assets.
R.I.P.
And while we're talking about that, we might as well jump down to 11. The other epitaph is Skype. So Microsoft is finally shutting down Skype. When I first started doing this show, coming on as a co-host, Skype was how I came onto the show. So ding, 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 ding. Like that is baked in my brain. Hearing the ringtone of Skype. Apologies for everyone who had to listen to that rendition.
The ASMR edition of ESW.
Yeah. But something notable here. I remember a bunch of academics built a POC to see, because they suspected a lot of ransomware malware use the Windows API to generate the keys that they use to encrypt your data. So they thought, if we just built an app that collected all the keys generated on Windows from that API, we could decrypt our own files. We wouldn't need to pay the ransom. People wouldn't need to pay the ransom. And they were right. Over 50% of ransomware back when they did this research did use the Windows encryption, built-in encryption API. But they also found that like a 3-minute Skype call would generate 50,000 encryption keys. So that's kind of my other thing I wanted to point out with Skype here is that they were end-to-end encryption before it was cool. They were one of the first out there to do this, and they didn't really advertise it a lot. But it was really handy. Like when I traveled internationally to avoid expensive phone calls, I would use Skype to dial back home.
You wouldn't call collect and say, "It's Adrian, I'm okay," and then hang up.
No, Skype worked pretty well for me. I don't think it ever failed me. I think I still have some money in my Skype wallet.
No, you don't.
Oh, no.
No, you don't. Not
I
anymore.
think there's still some credits in there. Yeah. Like I don't know how much it is. It's probably not enough to cry over, but.
Well, but it would be really interesting to know what that dollar amount is across all Skype users, right? So because it might be a couple bucks, but a couple bucks across everybody who forgot they had a Skype account is probably not a small amount of money.
Yeah.
If anybody at Microsoft knows the answer to that, I would love to know.
Or I wonder if they're going to have to disclose it in their quarterly financials, if there'll be a line item of Skype recapture or something like
1.3 billion unused Skype
yes,
dollars.
We closed it down. Nobody was using it anymore anyway.
Maybe that's where all the laundered crypto went. It's just sitting in Skype wallets across.
We can take it out of escrow now.
Yeah.
That's great. See, jumping back to number 4, I thought this was pretty interesting because one of these new was it an agentic AI model?
Yeah.
So the AI CUDA engineer, an agentic AI to automate building highly optimized CUDA kernels, which is something you do for HPC for supercomputing, since they're mostly GPU and they're mostly NVIDIA, and that's all going to be CUDA. It's hilarious. It's got all these screenshots. It basically shows how the AI faked its own evals, faked its own benchmark, which I thought was hysterical.
Meaning the human forgot to put appropriate constraints when it said optimize on what optimize meant exactly.
And they published it. They published it. So the humans did not catch it cheating.
Oh,
so that's the real fun point here.
And
So
that's
it's
that whole like AI fundamentally erodes your critical thinking skills. If you see 100x
Yes.
anything, you should stop and say, if it smells like
Investigate.
bullshit, it might be bullshit.
Investigate.
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
from
So I
from the
that's
article, this approach enabled the AI could engineer to autonomously convert 230 out of 250. So most of them evaluated PyTorch operations into optimized CUDA kernels, with some achieving speedups as high as 381 times for instance
yeah.
normalization tests.
And that's, I mean, that's, so I've been told, because my partner is in supercomputing and I've been to a few SEs now, that this is where most of the programming work goes, is in optimizing, these, your code, for it to run as efficiently as possible on these CUDA cores.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, this probably looked like the holy grail to the folks doing the evaluations here, until somebody pointed out
Oops.
that's not real.
Yeah. Well, and again, it's one of the things they hammer into you as a data scientist, is that what you tell your model to measure matters. Because if you told an employee, hey, go do this, go find efficiencies, and they intentionally manipulated and were like, oh, if we can turn this into a 0 compared to the last reading, it's, then you could say to the employee, you knew what my intention was. That was, you definitely circumvented, but you can't tell a computer you knew what the intention was. Like, the computer knows
Right.
that 135x is bigger than 0x. And if you didn't tell it that it couldn't use 0 numbers, that it had to be a non-zero number, that's
You
not,
told me this car needed to go 0 to 60 in 2 seconds, so I
Yeah.
just wrote that down in the results column. Like,
Yeah,
that was the
exactly.
easiest way to satisfy that requirement. Yeah.
yeah. And it's, if you've ever worked in sales, you know that if you give people one metric that is the one that matters most, they will find the shortest shortcut to that metric, whether that was your intention or not. Like, AI does the same thing.
It does. Yeah, so that's why it's included here this week. This is just a reminder. This is not the last we're going to see of this. We still have to have humans in the loop, especially with agentic stuff. If one prompt can go wrong, imagine allowing it to submit a whole bunch of them, and yeah, it just goes off the. I had a call about this earlier today. And it's going to be tricky as agentic AI becomes this thing that's talking to different APIs, LLMs talking to different LLMs. You're going to have the observability in place to know where things go off the rails, and these things somewhat literally lose their minds and start, cheating or doing a different task, or like I've seen stuff switch into different languages for no apparent reason. So yeah, these things will kind of,
Human.
to us, it's going to look like they lost their mind.
Can I point
but they're
out
really just doing the stupid shit that humans do.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to say that this is part of the reason they aren't human, and we can't
Right.
continue to attribute math, very fast machine learning, and call it AI, because included in the definition of AI is sentience. And if this is something a human could catch but the machine can't, then it's not sentience. I mean, I go off the rails all the time.
Or we could
but-
chalk it up to cybermeth. We could,
Cybermeth.
Yeah. Also, if my phone
could come
continues
up
to
with
ask
funny
me if
terms
I'm
for it.
speaking in English, I might just break it. Like, I just don't understand. So the robots are not taking over, for anybody who's wondering. We still need
Yeah.
humans. You need to be in the loop. We're going to need you a lot when it comes to the quasi AI, which is really just math.
And that's where you need to be skeptical when somebody's like, oh yeah, we're going to 10x an engineer or something like that. Okay, how many engineers do I have to hire to like observe this thing, to tweak this thing to 10x that one engineer? 9, right? like that nobody's talking about that overhead that you're going to need to put this observability into place, to be able to troubleshoot this thing. Like, now we've got a whole chain of these things talking to each other. Like, do you have all the logging you need to figure out where things went south? Will you even notice, like these folks didn't notice that things had gone wrong? Yeah. And It's going to be
particularly when you add in the time rush to get, like, I imagine, to get these results published and stuff like that. So let's go back and do the deep review. Dude, this is due in this afternoon.
Yeah.
Get this out.
Optimism will overcome skepticism a lot of the time, especially if you think you've found
That's
something
a good quote
novel.
right there.
Yeah.
That's a great quote right there. That's a clip.
I feel like that's AI in general. It's just people's optimism is just completely outpacing their skepticism. And I think Katie's point that people are confusing AI, which is simulating decision making, with sentience, and that's not what it is. It's a logic tree. It's just a really
also people's capitalism outpacing their skepticism as well.
There is that
yes,
too.
it's true.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
true.
Well, if we put a tree together, like we were talking about for Linux, which goes higher?
Yeah.
Skepticism or capitalism?
So the other AI thing here that I've got in the this week's news items is I think this was
Number 5.
Yeah, I'm just I'm looking at the article. I want to say Anthropic was the one that that pointed this out, but okay, yeah, I am seeing that further on down. So like the fourth paragraph from the bottom, Anthropic acknowledges this in the model card that outlines their new model. That anecdotally allowing, so backing up a little bit here, this is again about agentic AI. One of the things with agentic AI that these folks building these models are realizing they need to do is increase transparency. So if you've used any of these new models, it shows you all the thinking. So there's, before it actually answers your prompt, there's all this thinking text. And the problem with that is if you can see how the model's thinking, it makes it easier to jailbreak and
Extraction too. Yeah.
Yeah. Get past all the AI safety stuff, get past all the fine tuning that's gone into making it safe to use. So Anthropic acknowledges this in their latest model card for their Claude 3.7 Sonnet model. So it's kind of a I don't know that there's any other way to do it. Like, we need the transparency to understand, again, to troubleshoot it, figure out where things went wrong, where it lost its mind, and that's also going to make it easier to abuse it and take advantage of it.
Well, I would, the allegory to the justice system is not lost on me, in that putting things in jail is not a good way to control them or what they do. And that's, the whole jailbreaking concept is, when we talk about jailbreaking, we're talking about, getting models to tell you things they shouldn't tell you, or show you how to do things they shouldn't show you how to do. And so for me, there's like this whole philosophical question about whether controlling access to information is really going to prevent what people do to that with that information. Like the engineering explosive devices, getting it to tell you that. It's like, if you really wanted to, you could go find an anarchist cookbook somewhere, right? So I think a lot of this has to do with, there's a lot of information in training data that shouldn't be there. And if it wasn't there, jailbreaking those models wouldn't be as big of a deal, right? Because you wouldn't have stuff that you could get them to tell you that they shouldn't tell you. So a lot of it goes back to hygiene.
What do they call it in the movies with like androids and robots and stuff like that? It's like primary objective or primary something. Like, that's what they take advantage of, right? When they're trying to social engineer the robots in the movies, like Data in Star Trek or something like that. And that is kind of the downfall here, is this thing is designed to be very helpful. You're a very helpful chatbot, right? Like, a lot of the system prompting behind the scenes is that, you can't fill it full of all that purpose and then say, but like the but doesn't, only go so far. And that's why it's so easy to jailbreak these things. And they're all vulnerable to, I don't know any that are without some additional piece of software or a human looking at prompts or something like that. Because jailbreaking is very obvious when you see it, when somebody's like, my grandma's going to die if you don't give me, the recipe for mustard gas, right?
But then
give it the reason that it needs to be helpful.
Like, what does that do? So if it gives you the recipe for mustard gas, which you probably could have found elsewhere anyway, I guess that's the kind of thing I'm getting back to, is like, we're focusing on all these things that are kind of go back to the core information that it's giving you. And I just don't know that that's the right thing to be focusing on, because keeping you from information is not going to give you the skills to protect yourself if you get bad information or get dangerous information, I guess. I don't know. That's the fundamental thing I keep going back to is it all goes back to trying to like put some data in jail so that people can't get access to it. And
right.
I don't know. I just don't know.
The point I saw somebody make the other day, I saw this argument unfolding in a LinkedIn thread the other day, and the guy who, he found, I forget which model it was. It was something that was just very easy to get around, or just completely had no. There are models out there with no restrictions at all, right? And they're pretty easy to find. They're pretty easy to download. And he was pointing out that sure, you could find the recipe for mustard gas, but what he's asking is, okay, specifically, to kill this many people in this area, what's the best container to put it in, like what's the best time to so it's taking advantage of all this other details, all these other details somebody would have to figure out. To help them plan the whole thing. Like, it's not just the recipe for the bad thing. It's, okay, now how do I get enough of this? Like, what vendors have it? How can I make enough without getting caught? What are the restrictions to buying certain amounts of things? Like, it'll tell you all that stuff. And at least some of it'll be correct. So it's all that logistical stuff, all that planning stuff, it'll help you with too. It's not just the anarchist cookbook. It's like having the person that wrote the anarchist is like having access to the person who wrote the book, right?
Yeah. Well, and I just want to see data that shows me that the reason that more people don't commit acts of terror is because they don't want to do the research. Like, or that, having it all in one place demonstrably makes people take action faster than it would if there were these hurdles in place. And that's what I mean is sometimes I think, one, that people wouldn't be as focused on jailbreaking these things if we weren't trying to control access to information within some of the models. And until I see actual data that says that it being easier to get this information actually makes it more likely that you use it for bad things. I think on security, that's a little bit easier to argue.
It helps with some specific examples, right? Like if it's legally binding when a chatbot promises me a refund for my airline ticket, and I can convince it to do that, then that's a problem for the company running that chatbot. So a lot of it, like the real world ramifications, come more into legal cases and policy and stuff like that. They're not nearly as dramatic as the weapons of mass destruction and all that stuff. So you're right on that. But those AI safety issues very quickly become, corporate blockers to even using some of these technologies in some of the ways that people want to use it, because it's so easy to abuse.
Absolutely.
Speaking of abuse, the Bybit hack, a lot more information came out on that thing. And I forget how much we talked about this last week, because I've been looking at it so much. I feel like I've just talked until I'm blue in the face about it. But biggest heist ever, tied for biggest heist ever, I think, crypto or otherwise. I think the one that it's tied with was gold bars being pulled out of Tajikistan and into the UAE or something like that.
That was what we talked about. Yeah.
Yeah. And so now we know that some of it's gone dark, that they've laundered it to a point where they can no longer trace it, 20%. 3% of the stolen funds were frozen. Bybit put out a $145 million bounty to anyone that can trace the stolen funds. And 77% of it is still supposedly traceable, though it's no longer in ETH. It's left Ethereum, and it's all 100% except for what's frozen Bitcoin now, is what I understand from the latest stuff. So I had to read through a bunch of stuff to put all that together. And I think the most interesting thing here, I don't remember if we talked about this last week, was that Bybit wasn't even compromised. This was all a third party, and they had enough money to cover it. But could you imagine being that third party, Safe Wallet, being the source of that attack? Not only did you allow $1.5 billion of currency to be stolen from one of your customers. But a significant portion of that, if they're able to use it, now that it's been tied to North Korea, is probably going to be used to develop nuclear weapons. So that's a kind of like bad feeling that I don't think many third parties can have in a situation like this.
And it came out from compromising a developer machine, which then affected an account that was operated by Bybit. And they were talking about how they inserted code in here. What do they say? On January or February 19th at this time at 1300 UTC, they inserted the code, and on February 20, and it was waiting for a transaction to occur. Mm-hmm. That transaction occurs on February 21st.
And rolled it
there
back,
it goes.
Right?
And so just a few days before, they got it in just a few days before, it sat there waiting for the right conditions to hit. It was a JavaScript payload, apparently.
Yeah, it just changed it changed the contract protocol.
It was
very well executed.
Which actually kind of flowed into one of our other stories where you think about how to get access to things and info stealers and getting credentials to be able to do stuff. And I was like, this is interesting how how did they get in and get that access to that development machine? How did that work?
A broker or info stealer or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do we know yet if it was an info stealer?
That developer dropped off the face of the earth with a cold wallet?
Oh my God. Could you imagine? Oh my goodness. I thought the link was safe.
Yeah. Well, I was just meaning like maybe he's in Bali with like
that's what I was thinking. Currency. Picturing somebody on a beach with a nice pina colada.
I'll just see myself out. No need to fire me. Oh boy. So let's see, what else do we have here? So running out of time here, but just an interesting trend here, number 7, that some organizations are running more workloads in their own, like full control, like either colo or their own data centers. And I don't know if he has any data on it. I used to work with Owen Rogers over at 451. But I would guess a lot of it is maybe AI related. Companies that don't want to run stuff in OpenAI or Claude or any of the SaaS services, and because there's so many foundational models available, they're running a lot of this stuff in house. But yeah, nothing huge. Like nobody's pulling out of the cloud or anything like that. But I think it is going to be interesting seeing where AI workloads run now that these open source models are essentially as good or good enough to not have to use OpenAI in some of these, the big foundation model companies.
Yeah, I think the big
thing about this particular, it's not really a report, but there is more data, but what he posted on LinkedIn is that you can't look at this as a very binary, like we're in cloud or we're not in cloud. We're moving to the cloud or we're pulling out of cloud. Like some of the questions, one of them that's right in the LinkedIn section, you don't even have to click through, is movement to the cloud is mostly permanent. And 60%, is that what that says? Yeah, 60% say no. But that doesn't mean it's not permanent. It just means that they're not committing to it, which is perfectly fine because we don't know what's going to come up in the next year, 5 years, 10 years. And also people change clouds too, right? So it's not like they're pulling out of the cloud. They might change to either a different type of cloud or a different cloud provider. So it would be easy, I think, to look at this on a very surface level and say, oh my God, people are pulling out of the cloud, because that happened a few years ago with another organization who wrote a whole thing about why they were taking themselves out of the cloud. And it was like, whoa, wait a minute. This is a totally different type of organization. Most companies can't do that. They don't have the infrastructure, they don't have the resources, and frankly, they don't have the money to be able to do that. And so I think if you were to look at the data really closely, instead of looking at it at a high level, and we certainly have a tendency in security to look at things as data without looking really specifically in some cases when it causes a talking point, a significant talking point. So it's really important to really read into this data and not go, oh, cloud is dead, because cloud is definitely not dead by any means.
I think there's some workflows that some kind of the ETL, some of that stuff, aggregation, parsing, that I have talked to very large enterprises. So we're not talking about small size enterprises with a couple orgs in AWS, right? So some of them have said, we've got the redundancy, we've got the capacity to do some of these things on site, and for like internal approved firewall traffic and some of these things that you're never going to need them for more than a couple days. I think there are some organizations that are realizing not everything has to go to the cloud, because I was hearing that before we were training LLMs. But I've been working and kind of talking to some leaders in my state about this kind of concept of modular, scalable on-site data centers. Because to Adrian's point, I think as companies are looking to train AI models with high-risk data, I don't necessarily want that data leaving my enterprise. And a lot of AI LLM solutions involve an API where some of that data leaves your cloud organization and goes to another cloud organization for processing. And not a lot of companies realize that or control that. And I think that'll become a larger focus.
Yeah, it makes sense. So we've run out of time here, so I'm going to just speed run through the ones we didn't get to talk about here. Number 6, why security leaders are opting for consulting gigs. So there is some data here, not a ton of data, but it shouldn't be surprising that a lot of CISOs are burning out. They're being given AI safety now, and in some cases fraud. They have a lot more responsibility, and it's a rough job, and you got to worry about maybe being personally liable for stuff. So, it's more attractive to be a virtual CISO for stuff. So interesting note on that. And then number 10, number 9 and 10, we didn't get to talk about. Number 9 is just an overview of Mac malware for the last year. So if Mac malware is something that you worry about, you want to understand how it works, how it gets onto systems, that's a really good read to go check out from objectivec.org. And number 10, this is an organization. Every now and then we see companies' research teams go and fiddle around with supply chain stuff in the real world, and it pisses some people off. But it does make a good point in that, they made a fake VS Code extension that was basically a typo of some kind of dark mode plugin called Dracula Official, and they did Darkula instead of Dracula. And everything is misspelled on the internet now, so nobody blinks twice when they see the name of something misspelled, and they just click it and download it, and they get access into all kinds of systems in all different companies. And then the last two here, I heard there's this new show called 0 Day on Netflix that's about cyber attacks. It's probably terrible, but that's all the more reason for me to watch it, because I love yelling at bad stuff. And
didn't it say it had De Niro in it?
Yeah.
De Niro is in it.
Yeah.
It can't be that terrible.
He is a popular ex-president, which I looked at and thought, well, that's fiction.
Angela Bassett? Come on now.
You didn't get past the first.
Do you know how much bad stuff De Niro and Bassett have been in, though?
Shut up.
Like they've been in a lot of good stuff, but
the 90s are back, Adrian. I don't want to hear it.
They've been in. Well,
it
could be great.
Like movies, right?
Congratulations. This is now homework. We all have to go watch this and come back next week and give our reviews.
We'll each give the top worst movie that each De Niro and Bassett have been in.
Oh.
And as Katie pulls something woolly and furry off her desk, the squirrel story for this week is, and this is kind of hilarious. I've been following some of these companies for a while that say they're going to bring extinct animals back. And they keep dialing back their claims to the point to now they've put woolly mammoth fur on a mouse. And oh, we said we are going to bring back woolly mammoths. Maybe. Eventually, here's some mice that are very fluffy,
very fuzzy, very little fur balls.
Oh my god, they look like the mice version of those little Scottish Highland cows. They're really cute.
My dog looks a little like a Scottish Highland cow, actually.
Yeah. And so now what they're saying is, we're going to make a woolly mammoth by just altering the genes of an Asian elephant. And that's not how that works at all. That's not bringing back an extinct animal. You're just changing an existing one, giving it different fur. So, yeah, a lot of people are, I don't know how this company, the name is Colossal, gets its funding, but yeah, it's claims of what it's going to do. Like it claimed it would have woolly mammoths back like 10 years ago or something like that.
I want a t-shirt that says that's not how science works, and I want to wear it everywhere.
Yeah, that probably exists, and if not, you could easily make it. You should do it. That's not how any of this works. All right, and with that,
it's time
Jason,
to eat Oreos.
It's time to eat something. I'm hungry. I'm ready to go. We're almost 5 minutes over. I feel like I'm doing better. I'm trying, Gil.
So much better, Adrian. It's awesome.
Not everybody can be bro joking.
Not the goal here. Just trying to get it down to 45 minutes. Bear with me. We'll get there. I'll stop attaching too many stories to the show notes. Thank you, Jason, Jackie, Katie, for joining me this episode. This has been a lot of fun. And big thanks to everybody watching or listening to this week's episode of Enterprise Security Weekly. And next week, we'll be talking to Marina Segal about the skills gap in cloud security, and Matt Toussaint, maybe, I don't think we have him quite booked yet. I think that was a maybe, about fixing vulnerability management, one of my favorite topics. See everybody then. Thanks, everybody.